Some of this is kind of very much exploratory. A lot of my thinking related to knowledge kind of comes from a background in commercial archaeology, where at the depth of the financial crisis, we saw large-scale loss of knowledge, experience, and skill because of cuts to budgets. I was lucky enough to migrate into academia as partway through that process. And you see the same loss of knowledge and skills, partially because of the thing lurking in the framework. The acronyms on here, I'll explain what they are briefly, are specific in many ways to kind of UK universities. We've got knowledge exchange at the top, research excellence and teaching excellence. These are kind of metrics which are used to assess our value as professionals, but they skew and transform knowledge. What I'm really interested in not the kind of skews and biases these kind of frameworks introduce. I'm more interested in what it is we actually do as archaeologists. And lurking in the background, you see a series of silos, which I've labelled by various kind of categories on the bottom, but I could really replace those with different research traditions, different sectors of research. So it could be landscape archaeology, it could be archaeological science, it could be the archaeology of India, the archaeology of East Yorkshire. There are multiple frameworks within which we operate. And I've kind of migrated within the university from a purely archaeological background into an archaeological science background. And my initial thinking was essentially that I love the archaeological science. I work as a part of the team. I'm one of these columns, one of these silos in the background, and my colleagues fill in other gaps. We collaborate, the sum of our knowledge together is much more powerful. And I thought that was kind of refreshing, and it was a transformation from what I was used to. But thinking about my colleagues in the other building within the School of Archaeology, we have kind of scholars working across multiple scales. They could be temporal or spatial. And whilst they individually might work in a particular silo, because they're cross-cutting across different research traditions, what we're doing is identifying gaps in our knowledge that perhaps we can refine and improve. Now, I'm very conscious about the word of terminology I've got labelled in the background. The academy, again, the precariat. It isn't necessarily an us and them situation. But potentially one of the problems we have at the moment, that some of this innovation, some of this impact, some of this engagement and empowerment is taking place with people who have very specific roles, in part because of the way in which we're assessed. For a long time, I've been in this box in the bottom right-hand corner. I've moved into the box now in the bottom left-hand corner, and somehow I have to aspire to get to the top of that pyramid. I'm not quite sure how that happens. I know my colleagues understand the structure and the system in which I work, and they're supportive. They try and migrate you through that pyramid. But it isn't necessarily getting a permanent contract, getting an academic position doesn't change what you do as an individual. It doesn't put you into the category of them rather than us within the precariat. Now, the loss in some ways comes from the kind of temporary contracts that happen within the precariat. If you're only carrying out teaching for these excellence frameworks, you will have short-term contracts. When that funding comes to an end, you may reach a point within your life that you can't see progression in the framework. The information, the value you have as individuals drops out of the system. Now, really, what I should have had within this framework, which is a box at the bottom, this is the view from other colleagues in archaeology, that as digital archaeologists, we're not really on the spectrum. We're not in these silos of research traditions or silos of areas of research. We're supporting our colleagues doing proper archaeology. Now, we all do the same things as archaeologists. We have an interest in the past. We have interest in telling stories about the past. We need to think about commonalities of what we do. And part of what we're hoping to achieve today is understand the common things that we do together and how different technologies can feed into that and help us transfer knowledge to other disciplines, other parts of our own discipline and the wider community itself. Now, hopefully that's not being too autobiographic. Hopefully I haven't said anything that my employers won't like about that. But it gives you kind of a little bit of a flavour. I certainly know that the precariat situation is a problem in the States as well through adjunctification. It isn't a UK-based problem, but hopefully this is something that you can relate to whether you come from a commercial background or an academic background, and we can use this as a starting point for conversation. Thank you.